Hi, so I'm Caitlin Haynes. I'm the reference archivist at the National Anthropological Archives, which is part of the Department of Anthropology in the National Museum of Natural History at the Smithsonian Institution. Here at ATALM 2017, I was part of a workshop, pre-conference workshop on finding Indigenous-Related Collections at the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of the American Indian, National Museum of Natural History, and the Library of Congress. We're going to talk a little bit today about kind of a general introduction to what archives are, why we want to use them, why they're useful, and how to go about searching for materials in archives, what to prepare and expect for actually conducting research on site in an archives, and then specifically the kinds of tools that we use to discover archival materials at the Smithsonian. So I think most people are familiar with libraries and archives, and they're similar in many ways, but they're also different in the kinds of materials that they house and the ways in which you can access them. So at archives, they hold both published and unpublished resources, but primarily primary sources that are unique or rare. So in a library, you might have copies of secondary sources that are books that you could find anywhere, but at an archives, you'd find the original manuscript and the notes from that particular book that you couldn't find anywhere else. And so because those materials are that way, you can't access them in the same way you can at a library. You can't browse the shelves or check them out and take them home with you. They have to be served in a research room and pulled for you by staff for preservation reasons and to make sure that they're safely secured. So you know you want to do archival research. You might have a particular topic that you want to research on. In the National Anthropological Archives, we have a lot of materials related to Indigenous history. And so a lot of people know that they want to search for materials on a particular tribe or a particular time period in history, but they don't know where to start or where to go first. So when you're conducting archival research on a particular topic, honestly, the best place to start, if you have no idea, is Google. Maybe Google the specific topic you're interested in, or if you know something's at the Smithsonian but you don't know where, you can type in Smithsonian Archives to a Google search engine and see what you can find. It's also a good idea to look through books or websites on topics that you're interested in and see if they cite archival repositories that can give you a starting point, and then search for the name of that repository in Google. There's also a number of online resources that provide general information on various archival repositories around the world. Things like Archive Finder do require a subscription, but other ones like Archive Grid, Archives Wiki, the National Union Catalog of Manuscript Collections called NUCMUC, and then larger institutions like the Library of Congress, the National Archives, or the Smithsonian, which is just si.edu, have information on different repositories around the world and different kinds of archival collections. Then once you find the repository you're looking for, you can type that into Google and see if that repository has its own website, which most of the time they do. At the National Anthropological Archives, we have our own website that lists information on who we are, the history of the archives, and the kinds of materials that we hold. So once you've found the repository you're looking for, how do you find out what collections are there and how to access them? So oftentimes within an archive's website, or maybe there's a link in their website to another database, you'll find a catalog or an online database for actually searching records related to the kinds of materials they hold. In the archival world, we call most of the time these records catalog records within these online databases. At the Smithsonian Institution, there is one main search site called Collections Search Center, which is the online database for all Smithsonian museum objects, archival collections, library books, artwork, sound recordings, photographs, everything you could ever possibly want from all 19 museums, research centers, and the National Zoo. So it's kind of a one-stop shop. So there's little tips and tricks for narrowing your search results to which repository you're looking for that we can go over a little bit later. But in these databases, like Collections Search Center, you'll find catalog records for the actual item you're looking for. A catalog record is basically a kind of summary or short description of an actual specific item or an entire collection. Usually within a catalog record, it will include things like the title of the item or the collection, who donated the item, who created it or who collected it, how big it is. Sometimes we say the extent. So is it 525 photographs or is it one box? It will also sometimes say what kind of material it is. Is it a photograph? Is it a manuscript collection? Is it artwork? It might list some subject terms. So does this relate to 19th century history? Does it relate to Tuscarora Indians? And then sometimes there will be a brief descriptive note or a background note about what the collection is about, when and how it was created and why it was acquired by the archives. You might also come across actual finding aids for collections within catalog records. That's an archival term. A finding aid are documents that describe the contents of an individual collection. You can kind of think about it like a table of contents for a book. So it's a way that archivists can describe for researchers the actual information within a large collection. So if a collection is 156 boxes, you can look at a finding aid to see what kind of information is in each box, and sometimes in each folder within each box. So it's a really useful tool for discovering information and materials within an archives. Finding aids also sometimes go even further than that and include what we call a background or historical note that describes the background of the collection or the person the collection is about, like say the Thomas Jefferson papers. If that was one collection, that historical note would have an example about who Thomas Jefferson was and why his work was important. It might also have a scope and content note about what the collection is. Does it cover just the professional activities of that person or that organization? Or does it cover everything about their personal life? It might also have an arrangement note, which describes what an archivist does to the collection when we process it and organize it to make it more useful for researchers to access. Keep in mind as well that every archival repository holds different amounts of materials and has different access to resources and funding and staff. So not every repository, even the NAA, has absolutely everything online or cataloged in perfect ways. So it's always useful to contact archival staff. Most archives have reference staff. Sometimes it's a team of individuals, or sometimes it's just one reference archivist like me at the National Anthropological Archives who can help you navigate the collection. That's entirely what my job is to help researchers find and access and understand our materials more easily. So it's always a good idea to find contact information on an archives website, reach out to the staff and find out if they know of more collections that relate to the topic you're interested in or can help give you kind of search tips to navigate their online database or catalogs. As you're looking through an online database or a website, you might also come across digital collections. Some archives, including the NAA, has digitized some of their holdings. Most archives are not able to digitize everything because there's just so much material. But we do try and digitize material and make it available online for researchers to access from anywhere. Oftentimes, websites or databases will have links to just digital collections, and you can browse just by what's digitized. Collections Search Center does allow that. Or within each catalog record, there might be an actual digital image next to the catalog record title, which will show you that that material is digitized. And again, you can always reach out to reference staff and see if the material you're interested in is digitized or can be digitized. Some material you'll see in catalog records and in finding aids is labeled as restricted. So what do you do if material is restricted, and what does this even mean? Material in archives can be restricted for a number of reasons. Sometimes there are copyright restrictions. Just because an archives actually physically holds a collection doesn't mean that we own the copyright to it. So maybe it's still under copyright and it can't be reproduced. Other times things are restricted because they're medical records or student grades, social security numbers, things like that have legal restrictions applied to them that usually can be lifted. Those restrictions can be lifted after a period of time. Also, especially relevant for something like ATALM and for our materials in the National Anthropological Archives, we have many materials that are culturally sensitive and restricted for culturally sensitive reasons. And we try and collaborate with Native communities on what those restrictions should be and how they should be imposed. So sometimes material is only available to tribal members. Sometimes it's available to everyone, but only to be viewed in person and can never be reproduced. Sometimes it's not available for viewing at all. So if you ever have any questions about restrictions, that's another thing that you can contact archival staff about to sort of see what's going on and see how you can access material. Sometimes material also can't be reproduced because it's too fragile. So just sort of talk to archival staff and see what's possible.